Aloha, I'm Mrs. Fisher, and today we're going to be looking at grammar concept number 12. Specifically, we're going to look at how to punctuate the word because, sentence fragments, run-ons, adjective comparisons, and double negatives. All right, let's get started. So here's a deeper dive into independent and dependent clauses that we learned in our last grammar concept. So this is just a refresh so you remember what we said about grammar. Dependent, independent clauses.
Dependent clauses.
Oh yeah, DC.
When the cops surrounded the door. What do you mean when the cops surrounded the door? That's not even a complete sentence. I mean, if you had said the cops surrounded the door, then maybe that would make sense. Okay, but when you say when the cops surrounded the door, I just have to know what happened next for that to even make sense. What about it? A clause is a group of related words. It contains gripping clause, both a subject and a verb. Independent clauses have a subject and a verb, express complete thoughts, and can be understood. Dependent clauses have a subject and a verb, but they begin with an additional word. DC start with conjunctions, remember, which make them subordinate. They need an IC to finish what they meant. If you simply state a DC, it leaves you wanting more. For example, when the cops surrounded the door, cops is the subject, surrounded is the verb, but an IC is needed to be understood. When the cops surrounded the door, all the criminals fell on the floor. Now that my DC has an IC, I won't be needing more.
All right, so I'm sure you remember that from your last grammar lesson. We said that when you have two sentences, you can put them together. You can put periods at the end of each, right? She teaches, we learn. You can combine them with a semicolon, she teaches, semicolon, we learn, because they're similar. Or we can combine them with a coordinated conjunction, boys fan, and we need to put a comma if we use one of those, but, or, yet, so, for, and, nor. Or we can have an independent clause with a dependent clause. Independent clauses start with one of these words up here, and if it's in the middle of the sentence, it acts as the comma. If it's in the beginning of the sentence, then you need to put the comma. All right, so we learned all of that. Next, but one of the words, okay, so let's look at this for a second. So just before we do this, one of the words on here is the word because. It's right here. So this word because, it has a special exception for its punctuation. So yes, normally when it's in the middle of the sentence, it does not need a comma, just like all the other words. But there is an exception to sometimes when it's in the middle of the sentence where you'll put a comma before it. There's two reasons why you would do that. So sometimes the comma goes before because, but that is only when the clause after the because is non-essential, you don't need it, or when the sentence has a negative verb. In those cases, you add a comma before the because. So a negative verb, which we're going to look at double negatives at the end of this also. Here are two examples of essentials and non-essential clauses. Essential, I want to emphasize this. Lance had to order flowers for Nikki because he was in Alaska and Nikki was in Kansas. It's non-essential. This is not important to the meaning. Tony ordered flowers online to surprise his wife on their anniversary, comma, because telephoning the order was not possible. So in this case, we wanted to emphasize the second part of the sentence, so we did not put a comma. Here, just think about like that, where you could scoop it out of the sentence. Here we put the comma because it was not important. So to emphasize the reason, we do not add the comma, just like that essential appositive. But to de-emphasize it, we do add the comma, so we can scoop it out of the sentence because it wasn't important. So that de-emphasizes it. The other time that you put a comma before because is if there's a negative verb, like didn't. Lance didn't order flowers online for Nikki, comma, because it was their anniversary. He bought her flowers because it was her birthday. The comma is needed for clarity. The pause helps the reader understand. Without the comma, the sentence does not make sense and sounds like he is mad at her on their anniversary. Here's what it would sound like without the comma. Lance didn't order for flowers online for Nikki because it was their anniversary. He bought her flowers because it was her birthday. So now it sounds like he didn't order her flowers because it was their anniversary. So it's like, I don't order her flowers on our anniversary. So notice you put the comma for clarity here. So we have that pause. All right, so let's try this. Choose the answer that's the best way to write the underlined section of the sentence. If there is no mistake, choose correct as is. Because I made a website, my students do not struggle to keep up. Remember, this is in the beginning of the sentence, so what do we have to do in the middle of the sentence? All right, choose the answer that's the best way to write the underlined section of this sentence. Because I made a website, so here's the way to do it. My students do not struggle to keep up. Website, comma, my students did not struggle. There you go, that's correct. Here's another one. Because it was dark, Nikki had to go home. How do we punctuate that one? If you chose to punctuate because it was dark, comma, Nikki had to go home. Correct. Because that's that. Now, when you have a fragment, so what is a sentence fragment? A fragment is a part of a sentence, not a complete thought. Whenever you add that subordinating conjunction to an independent clause, it becomes a fragment. So for example, this is a complete thought. He prefers outdoor recreation. But when I add although, now it's no longer a complete thought. Although he prefers outdoor recreation. Adding although made it no longer a complete thought. We need to know although what? We are left hanging. So to fix this sentence fragment, we must add another sentence before or after the sentence fragment. So we can add the subject and verb, he spends time indoors. Although he prefers outdoor recreation, he spends time indoors. You punctuate this with a comma between the two sentences. Without the comma, it would be considered a run-on. So it gets the comma here. To fix the sentence fragment, you can add another sentence before or after. So here if we added it after, he spends time indoors although he prefers outdoor recreation. In this case, we see the although as the comma and we don't put a comma. A fragment is a part of a sentence. It's not a complete thought. We attend the game. That's a complete thought. But if I said, if we attend the game, now it's no longer a complete thought. We have to know if what we're left hanging. So to fix this sentence fragment, we must add another sentence. So we could add the sentence, our team might win, after our fragment. If we attend the game, our team might win. We punctuate that by putting a comma between the subject, verb, because this has the subordinate conjunction at the beginning of the sentence. And that way it's not a run-on sentence. Without that comma, it would be a run-on sentence. Our team might win. Our team might win if we attend the game. In this case, we don't put the comma because now we moved if. That subordinate conjunction is in the middle of the sentence acting as the sentence, as the comma. When we arrived, now we got to know what happened next. So we could add the simple sentence, when he arrived, we all yelled surprise. And notice the when is at the beginning of the sentence, so we put a comma here so that it's not a run-on. We could also add it to the end of the sentence. We all yelled surprise when he arrived. And the when becomes the comma, so you didn't need a comma. So run-on, two or more thoughts incorrectly joined. Glenn managed to find the time. It was important to him. Now those are subject, verb with a comma in between. That is a run-on sentence. A comma doesn't go between subject, verb, subject, verb. As we've learned in our rules, we can put a semicolon between the two, and that would be okay. Glenn managed to find the time. It was important to him. All right, so now we're going to change to looking at comparing using adjectives. This is something that I really want to emphasize with the students because I hear you guys using this wrong all the time, and it is something important for you to know how to use correctly.
Adjectives, degree, comparing with adjectives.
Positively speaking, I positively never compare anyone or anything. It's just my little positive thing.
Well, I'm comparative, and I'll compare too for as long as I live. Comparatively speaking,
I think there's something of value in comparing
only two. Comparing to what a party pooper. I compare three or more because I'm super. A superlative, at least triple comparison trooper. That's me, super. Adjectives can be found modifying nouns or pronouns. Adjectives answer questions, 1 of 5 you choose. Which one, what kind, how many, how much, or whose? Adjectives can be found modifying nouns or pronouns. Adjectives answer questions, 1 of 5 you choose. Which one, what kind, how many, how much, or whose? What are the adjective degrees? Positive, comparative, and superlative. Just those 3. Positive degree, there is no comparison, it's just about 1. Comparative degree only compares to, like comparing you with you. Superlative degree compares 3 or more. Positive, comparative, superlative, let's go explore. Positive degree, there is no comparison, it's just about 1. Like, you are tall, they are small, or I am musical. Comparative degree only compares to, like comparing you with you. 1 syllable adjectives usually add ER. Between us two, I am taller, or you are smaller. 2 or more syllable adjectives usually add less or more. Between us two, you are less musical and I am more hardcore. In the superlative degree, you must have at least 3. 2 or 1 syllable adjective, add EST. Among us 3, I am the tallest, or you are the smallest. 2 or more syllable adjectives usually add least or most. Among us 3, you are the least silent and most verbose. Positive, comparative, and superlative. It's easy to boast.
All right, so this is a really easy concept once you understand it. So what we have here is the degrees, the names of the degrees are not important. What is important is that you understand that if you're just have one person and you're saying I'm tall, you wouldn't say I'm taller, you just say I'm tall because there's no comparison. In the comparative degree, there's 2. If you're comparing 2, then you add ER if it's a 1-syllable word into some 2-syllable words. But when it's 3 or more syllables, I know this says 2 or more, but 3 or more syllables, and for some 2-syllable words, we add more or less and we don't add the ER. If we're comparing, it's the superlative degree, then we're looking at 3 or more and we add EST to a 1-syllable word and some 2-syllable words. But to 3 or more syllable words and to some 2-syllable words, we add most or least without the EST. For example, the word tall. So here, if you're just by yourself, you would say, I am tall. If you were looking at 2, between us 2, I am taller. Among us 3, I am the tallest. So between, you use the word between when it's 2 people. You use the word among when it's 3 or more. You use ER to a 1-syllable word, taller, smaller, nicer. You add EST to 3 or more. So I am taller, or tallest, smallest, nicest. All right, if you are looking at So this intelligent, that's a lot of syllables. Intelligent, right? 4 syllables going on there. So with intelligent, obviously we're not going to say intelligent-er or intelligentist. So you add those words. So this would be the example. I am intelligent. Between us two. Now we know we're looking at 2 that we're comparing between. So that's the between. I am more intelligent. You wouldn't say between us 2, I am the most intelligent. It's more when you're comparing 2. However, if you're comparing 3, then you don't say between. You don't say between us 3. You say among us 3. I am the, you wouldn't say more because it's 3 now. You would say most intelligent. All right, and if you were using the less or least in the same word, intelligent, I am intelligent. Between us 2, I am less intelligent. You wouldn't say the least if it was 2 people. If it's 3, among us 3, I am the least intelligent. So you don't add the ER or the EST, less intelligent-er or least intelligent-er. It's like when I hear people say, you're more prettier. No, you're prettier. Or you're more pretty, but you don't use both. All right, so knowing that, choose the correct sentence. Of the 3 girls, Nikki is the most educated. We're looking at 3. Number 2. So which one's correct? Of the 3 girls, Nikki is the most educated. Of the 3 girls, Nikki is the more educated. Of the 3 girls, Nikki is the educated-er. Which one is correct out of these 3 sentences? Of the 2 officers, Lance is the most experienced. Of the 2 officers, Lance is the more experienced. Of the 2 officers, Lance is the experiencedest. Choose the correct sentence. Between the 2 officers, Lance is the most talented. Among the 2 officers, Lance is the more talented. Between the 2 officers, Lance is the more talented. Which one's correct? Okay, choose the correct sentence. Between the 3 workers, Ashley is the stronger. But among the 3 workers, Ashley is the most strongest. Among the 3 workers, Ashley is the strongest. All right, so hopefully you understood how to do that. And now the last concept that we're hitting today is going to be double negatives. And this is also something that I hear you guys make a mistake on. So listen to this carefully.
Adverbs, double negatives. Oh yeah.
If you don't want to go nowhere, then get your coat. It's cold out there. What do you mean, get your coat? I said I'm not going nowhere, and that's a quote. Then get your coat and money for a taxi. Get enough for you and me. Taxis aren't free. What? I said I'm not going nowhere. Are you crazy? I said I'm staying home and being lazy. Then why did you say you wanted to go? I didn't say yes. I said no. Oh no. You said you did want to go somewhere. When you said I do not want to go nowhere. Okay, so what you meant to say is you don't want to go anywhere. Only one negative per clause. Don't use negatives in pairs. What other word should I avoid in one clause? No, not, or empty. None, never, no one, nothing, hardly, scarcely, but, meaning only. Wow, all those single negative words must get very lonely. No, not, or empty. None, never, no one, nothing, hardly, scarcely, but, meaning only. Well, thanks for the lesson. I found it very helpful, but odd. Can I go back now and listen to my iPod? Just so long as you now have a solid foundation. What's playing? Some guy Pink Floyd from your generation. What's he singing? We don't need no education. Wow, what an ironic situation.
That's so cute. I like the little mouse. All right, so You don't use two negatives in the same clause. If you say, I don't want no homework, you're saying, I do not want no homework, so you're saying, I want homework. The correct way to say that would be, I don't want any homework. I don't need no help. If you say, I don't need no help, you're actually saying, I do not want no help, which means I want help. The correct way to say that is, I don't need any help. I don't have no time. When you say, I don't have no time, you're really saying, I do not have no time, which means you do have time. So you would say, I don't have any time. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody means everybody. Everyone has time for that. So she should have said, nobody has time for that. Nobody tells me nothing. That actually means then everybody tells me something. So what he actually meant to say is nobody tells me anything. All right, so now to the pun that we heard at the end of our song, we don't need no education means we need some education. And if you're using double negatives, then you do too. All right, we are done and done. So now we're going to move on to our things to remember, and we're going to recap the grammar lessons we've had thus far. So, in capitalization, we learned to capitalize proper nouns, brand names of business products, but not the common noun next to it. We know to capitalize titles when they come before a person's name, like hopefully, Captain Fisher. I was Captain Fisher once, but Dr. Fisher is what I look forward to becoming. You capitalize direct addresses, the first word in every sentence, and every line of poetry, days of the week, months of the year, special calendar events, but we do not capitalize spring, winter, summer, or fall. We also know that when we are writing, that if we're asked to put in evidence, we are always going to put in quoted word-for-word evidence unless they ask us to paraphrase or summarize. If they do, they're testing our knowledge on the fact that when you paraphrase or summarize, it's in your own words and in your own styles, so you would not put it in quotes. When you're writing, your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation all count for and against you, so you need to double check everything and always use spell check. Always use it when it's available. All right, we also learned about adjectives. We learned more about adjectives today when it came to comparing. We talked in great length about dialogue, tone, and imagery, and we know when we're writing a narrative, which is a story, that we should always include dialogue, and that we need to make the story shown and experienced, not just told. And we do this through our dialogue and through imagery and through our tone. We know that if we're picking our pronoun, our subject-verb agreement with our pronoun reference, that we think back to a man's, and we know that if all, most, any, none, or some start our sentence, then we look at the object of the preposition to get our subject-verb agreement. However, we also know that each one of us has one body, and if we see any of these singular one bodies, that it is a singular pronoun. And it doesn't matter what's in the prepositional phrase. We look for the verb that goes with single it pronoun. Additionally, we learned about direct addresses, and that's directly who we're addressing in a sentence. It's set apart with a comma, and we capitalize it. We know that if we have an appositive, which is renaming someone, a noun, renaming them right after their name. So if we have their name and then it's renaming them, we know that the appositive is going to be in commas only if you can scoop it out of the sentence because you don't need it. Otherwise, we don't put commas around our appositive. But usually what you'll see on a state test is they'll put the first comma and then have the other part underlined and see if you know where to put that next comma. All right, and when you're choosing which pronoun to use between objective and subjective, you remember my Cookie Monster and you think about the ones with the M's in it and how they act as direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of the preposition. Remember, the direct object comes after a transitive verb, so I threw him the ball, and that's the indirect object is him. So you wouldn't say I threw he the ball, but we wouldn't say that anyway. It sounds awkward. But if you said I threw Tony and he or him, then it feels more, I'm not sure which one to put. I threw Tony and him the ball. All right. So we also learned that if we have a sentence where there's a linking verb, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, taste, feel, smell, sound, look, appear, become, seem, grow, remain, and stay, those are our linking verbs. If there's a predicate nominative renaming that person, like Mrs. Fisher is the teacher, and we are looking for the pronoun reference, so Mrs. Fisher is she or is her. We are not sure which one to do, so we just flip the order and we say she is Mrs. Fisher, because the predicate nominative following that linking verb is in the subjective case pronoun. And we learned that we use the active voice, which means we don't want there to be a, you want the subject to be doing the action, not receiving the action. So it's not the classroom was walked across by Mrs. Fisher, it's Mrs. Fisher walked across the classroom. We also want to make sure we have parallelism with our verb tense consistency, past, 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 present, 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 future, future, future. We learned that parallelism is very important, and if we use prepositional phrase in this part of our clause, we want to use it in this part of our clause and our second clause as well. And we want our adjectives to be similar also. We learned how to put together sentences, combine them into compound and complex sentences, compound using but, or, yet, so, for, and, nor, with a comma always before those. Complex sentences using these words that you see up here, and if it's in the middle of the sentence it becomes the comma. If it's in the beginning of the sentence we have to then put a comma between the subject verb connecting it. All right, and today we talked about because, and that is just like the appositive, so we put a comma if you can take that out of the sentence because it was not important. Otherwise we don't put the comma if you need it to make sense in the sentence. Or if there was a negative in the first clause, then you put a comma before the because. We also, lastly today, learned about degrees, and that if we are comparing two, we use ER for one syllable words. We use more or less for two or more syllable words. If we're comparing three, we use EST, most or least. And we say between when it's two, and we say among when it's three or more. All right, well that concludes today. You are done, and I am super proud of you. You are doing so great, and I know you have learned a lot this year.